They were experienced hikers. They were prepared. They knew the route. But that night, something changed. Without any clear reason, they cut their way out of the tent and ran into the snow. And all 9 of them never came back. January 1959, Northern Ural Mountains, Soviet Union. This was not just a mountain, it was a place where reaching it was difficult and surviving it even harder. Temperatures dropped below minus 30 degrees. The wind cut across the skin like a blade. Even breathing felt painful. One moment of carelessness and your body temperature would fall rapidly. Your life could be at risk within minutes. And yet, there were people who chose to go there, to push beyond their limits, to test themselves against the extreme. And that winter, 9 hikers entered those mountains. They understood the environment. They knew the risks. But what they were about to face was not just nature. This was not an inexperienced group. They were trained university students, a highly skilled team that had already completed multiple expeditions. Their leader was Igor Dyatlov, calm, composed, and trusted by everyone. They were heading toward Mount Otorten, following a carefully planned route. The paths were covered in snow and the winds never stopped, but they did not hesitate. Their progress was steady and their records remained consistent. And in the photos, they looked completely normal, smiling, relaxed, at ease. Nothing seemed unusual, but at some point, those records stopped. And after that moment, no one knows what really happened. They were supposed to return, and when they did, they were expected to send a message, but the scheduled date passed and nothing came. At first, it didn't seem unusual. Maybe they were delayed or the weather had slowed them down. But as time passed, that silence began to feel heavier. Days went by, and then more days. Still, nothing. Concern slowly turned into certainty. Something was wrong, and that feeling was impossible to ignore. Eventually, a search operation was launched. And from that moment on, this was no longer a simple missing persons case. It became something else, something that no one could fully explain. Days into the search, their tent was finally found. It stood half covered in snow, leaning slightly along the slope, as if it had been left there in a hurry. At first glance, it looked abandoned, like an empty shelter lost in the endless white. But as they moved closer, something felt wrong. The structure was still intact, but something about it didn't feel right. The tent had been cut open, not from the outside, but from the inside. The fabric was slashed unevenly, as if someone had forced their way out in a moment of panic. This was not a normal exit. It was an escape, and inside, everything was still there. Shoes, clothes, equipment, all left behind, even the items they would have needed most to survive the freezing cold. Nothing seemed disturbed. Nothing seemed missing, except the people. They had left everything behind and stepped out into the freezing night. Outside the tent, there were tracks in the snow, footprints, several of them, all leading in the same direction, toward the forest. They were not scattered, not chaotic, not the marks of panic. They moved slowly, step by step, as if they were walking, but something about it didn't feel right. They were barefoot or wearing only thin socks. In that temperature, that meant death. No one would choose to walk out like that, not in the middle of the night, not in those conditions. So why did they leave? Why did they abandon their gear, their warmth, their only chance to survive? And why did they move so quietly? No signs of struggle, no signs of running, just a silent trail leading away from safety. The tracks told a story of fear, but not the reason behind it. Near the edge of the forest, the first bodies were found, and nearby another. Both were discovered close to the remains of a fire, a desperate attempt to survive the cold. They had tried to stay warm, but their condition was not normal. They were barely dressed, and their bodies showed signs of severe damage, and their hands were covered in tree bark, even beneath their fingernails, as if they had tried desperately to climb, to escape something. But what they were running from, no one knows. Their injuries did not match a typical accident. They had broken ribs and severe skull fractures, yet there were no major external wounds. The force had clearly been strong, but it left almost no visible damage on the outside. Even from a medical perspective, it was difficult to explain. And then there was something even stranger. One of them was missing a tongue, something that could not easily be explained by natural causes. And as if that wasn't enough, traces of radiation were found on their clothing. Each detail only added more confusion and more questions. Their injuries did not match a typical accident, broken ribs, severe skull fractures, but there were no major external wounds. The force had been strong, but left little visible damage outside. Even medically, it was difficult to explain, and one of them was missing a tongue. Not something easily explained by natural causes alone. And then traces of radiation were found on their clothing. Each detail added more confusion, more questions. The investigation continued. Many theories emerged. An avalanche, military testing, extreme psychological panic, but none of them could explain everything. Why was the tent cut from the inside? Why did they leave without their equipment? Why did they walk out into the freezing night? And what did they encounter? This case never disappeared. Over time, it only left more questions, and even now, the truth of that night has never been fully revealed. Time has passed, but this case never truly ended. The truth remains buried in the snow, and even now, we still cannot fully understand what happened that night. Maybe they saw something, or maybe there was a reason we still don't understand, and that reason might still be there, waiting. This story ends here, but in the darkness, stories remain. Will you stay for the next one? Dark Case Hub.